to GB News. The fate of the Prime Minister remains in the balance as the much-anticipated Sue Gray report goes unpublished for yet another day. With Boris Johnson's back on the ropes, now with the added ignominy of accusations that he personally enabled a plane of stray dogs to be evacuated in the middle of a humanitarian crisis in Kabul, the vultures are circling and the bargaining has begun. Drop the tax hike for our support. Sack your officials if you want our backing. Bringing down Boris means bringing down Brexit. The fact that the Prime Minister is so evidently compromised begs the question of whether a leader in such a weak position can carry on in his role. Now, with some of his most stalwart supporters even floating the idea of a general election if he's toppled, no doubt to scare those Conservatives with small majorities, the clock is ticking down to something. We just don't know what yet. Well, let's take a look at some of the most damaging party claims and how they've been reported in the papers. The Guardian published a photo of multiple Downing Street staff, including the Prime Minister and his wife, appearing to socialise with wine in May 2020. 5 days later, the infamous Bring Your Own Bottle party, over 100 staff were allegedly invited, and the Prime Minister was there for nearly half an hour. Carrie Johnson was pictured with a friend in September 2020. Days before, Mr Johnson had told the public to keep their distance from those they don't live with. Then, the Christmas parties. First, the PM was revealed to have hosted a quiz while seated with colleagues, clearly in a festive mood. Then, as revealed by ITV, Number 10 staff were caught on camera joking about a Christmas party attended by around 40 people. Perhaps most damning of all, the evening before Prince Philip's funeral last year, when the Queen sat alone to mourn, 2 raucous parties were held inside Number 10. Well, I'm delighted to now be joined by Chairman of the Bow Group, Ben Harris-Quinney. Ben, do you think Boris Johnson has done enough to hang on to his leadership, or will this sequence of peccadillos and scandals mire the rest of his tenure if he does stay in position?
Well, I certainly don't think he's done enough yet, but I do think it's very interesting that Prime Minister's question time is supposed to be when the Prime Minister is on the ropes, when he is being challenged on all of the things he's doing, and of course, at a time of scandal, when he's being challenged about the scandals. And what seems to happen is that Prime Minister's question time is actually the high point of what is going on with Boris at the moment. He gives a good performance. Keir Starmer fails to land any serious blows. But then after that, we descend into, again, a cycle of more scandals coming out and sort of ludicrous excuses and perhaps not the best spokespeople being put forward for the defence of the government. And that really draws a big question over the Prime Minister's advisers. But one of the things that I think is most interesting, which has been generally missed in this Partygate scandal, is that if you look at the Prime Minister's unfavourability rating, it dropped far more significantly in 2020 than it has over Partygate. So in the second 6 months of 2020, he lost almost 30 points in terms of unfavourability rating. It went from the 30s to now the 70s, which, 70% of people have an unfavourable view of Boris Johnson, which is bad. But the Partygate scandal only accounts for about 12% of that rise in unfavourability rating. So it's only about a quarter of what the public see as the problem. And I think the much bigger part of the problem is that Boris just has not been delivering on that mandate that he ran on, both in terms of his leadership election and in terms of the 2019 election, to deliver a patriotic, conservative Brexiteer government. That's, I think, the bigger part of the problem. Not to deny the significance of the Partygate, but I think what's happening is he's losing his base, and that's far more serious.
I mean, you talk about the Prime Minister failing to deliver on his mandate. One might be able to excuse him a very pregnant pause with the pandemic to cash in on post-Brexit dividends. But have we not now got the problem that political animals have smelt blood and they want to go for the jugular? So instead of getting on with the business of delivering that mandate, of levelling up, of actually making a really good deal out of Brexit, they're all circling and plotting and planning and, going on manoeuvres, basically, rather than running the country.
Well, look, that's politics. If you fall into scandal, then people are going to take advantage. And as the Prime Minister said in Prime Minister's Question Time, of course Keir Starmer wants him to resign. That's Keir Starmer's job. So you're going to get all that. But in terms of delivering on the agenda, and look, yes, there's been a global pandemic, but that doesn't answer the question of why is the government pushing ahead with these crazy net zero policies that are going to bankrupt the country? Why are we having more immigrants coming into the country now than we were before Brexit? Why isn't the government doing anything about illegal immigration? Because, mass immigration is a problem in itself. 750,000 people came into the country legally in 2020, and you've got illegal immigration on top of that. And why is a Conservative Prime Minister hiking taxes to the highest point since World War II? Despite, as has been discussed many times on GB News, there's no need particularly for that national insurance rise because the Exchequer has taken in 12 billion or 13 billion more than it thought. So I don't think you can say, well, it's because they've been focused on the pandemic, because they've been doing a lot of unconservative things. It's not just that they've been doing nothing, it's that they've been moving backwards on the Conservative agenda. And you can look at social issues as well, and having organisations like Stonewall headline the Conservative Party conference, and stupid unforced errors like that just turn the base off. Then on top of that, you've got all the scandals and the Partygate and this sort of flying pets out of Afghanistan before people nonsense. And so, look, the pandemic's been a very, very tough time for everyone. It's been a tough time for the government. Mistakes were made, but mistakes were made everywhere on that. And you've got to take that into account, certainly. But I don't think it explains all the other stuff that I've just mentioned. And I think what needs to happen now, if Boris Johnson is to stay, is he needs a gold standard Conservative inside number 10, like a Lord Frost or a John Redwood running things, who's not going to take any nonsense, and that the base, that Brexiteer base that delivered the largest majority since Margaret Thatcher, is going to trust that person to deliver on the terms they were elected to.
Ben Harris-Quinney, thank you so much for your insight. That's Ben Harris-Quinney, who is, of course, chairman of the Bow Group. Now, Ben Habib is still with us. So from one Ben to another, it's interesting because the Prime Minister's in a weak position, and those people who have their particular ideologies or hobby horses are now being able to use it to try and extract from him what they want. Could this potentially turn out to be a benefit to Brexiteers like us who are saying, you've not done anything with this, put your foot on the gas, and perhaps a beleaguered Boris maybe is what we need to finally get on with getting Brexit delivered?
I mean, a beleaguered Boris in the last few days has delivered a lot more, hasn't he? He's scrapped Plan B. We're getting back to normal. He talks about being much more of a Conservative, a traditional Conservative. But Ben Harris-Quinney has hit the nail right on the head. From the word go, Boris Johnson has not been the Conservative Prime Minister for whom the country voted. I nearly said me. I didn't vote for him, by the way. But I voted for the... in fact, I can't say what I did on my ballot paper. But he hasn't been the Conservative Prime Minister that we would wish him to be. And we've got the largest state since World War II. We've got the highest taxes since World War II. And as we emerge from this hugely economically damaging lockdown period, he's raising taxes. And he's not just raising taxes on the rich. He's raising taxes on the working class. This increase in national insurance it's a regressive tax. It hits the working class the hardest. The very people in the red wall seats that gave him the majority that he's got are being penalised for electing him. And that was a manifesto pledge he's broken. And those of us who are close to Brexit know he hasn't delivered Brexit either. He said the entire country would leave the EU as one united kingdom. But we've left Northern Ireland very significantly behind. We haven't regained our fishing rights. We haven't got proper control of our borders. We've become the first country in history to partition ourselves without a single shot being fired, just at the behest of the European Union. And then on top of that, he's got this crazy net zero, becoming the Saudi Arabia of wind. I mean, it's quite amusing, but it's not the way you govern a country. And the cost of net zero is going to be $1.5 trillion by 2050. That's 35 billion a year, every year between now and 2050. And again, that's regressive. It's going to be a tax that hits the working classes the hardest. So out of the window has gone his central policy of levelling up the country. But just coming back to the political point, I think Boris Johnson is now in a dance with the Grim Reaper of his political career. And the reason I say that is that in order to distance himself from Partygate, in order to distance himself from all this scandal that seems to dog him, he's going to have to sack people. He's going to have to lay blame elsewhere. And the corpses of his enemies in the parliamentary party, and that's what matters right now. It's not really what the people think right now that matters. It's what the Conservative Parliamentary Party think. And the corpses are piling up, and his enemies are rising. And they are going to take him out. We saw this with John Major, for those of us who are old enough to remember John Major. He had this protracted dance with the Grim Reaper of his political career. But eventually, they knifed him. And that is going to happen to Boris Johnson. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.